Alright, hello, and welcome to Plugin Along, a stream dedicated to LOTRO plugins. Last time on Plugin Along, we were working on Festival Buddy 2 by trying to take the time zone that your computer is in into account while calculating the reset time of the Harvestmoth Wheat Mazes. Now, Harvestmath is finished, but I think we have what we need to make those changes so that at the beginning of next year's Harvestmath, we are ready to go. So today we're going to try to finish that off, including the guesswork of if we're in the middle of the US and EU daylight saving changes where one of them switches and a week or two later the other switches. So, as always, feel free to jump into chat with your thoughts and questions about Lord of the Rings Online in general, or plugins in specific. And in the meantime, where am I going to stand today while working on this? Just to verify, I'm pretty sure the horse Twistmeat is gone. So we'll go on over to the party tree and verify that it is a deserted disaster after the party. Well, I don't know. There's still people here. Maybe the party's not over. Oh, hey, token exchange is still here. Can you always do token exchange? Pretty nifty. I keep trying to hit sprint. The other game that I've been playing a lot of, Valheim, has a sprinting feature and a stamina feature, and neither are active here. Okay, so we cannot away ourselves to Twistmeat, so I'm going to stand up here looking down on the party tree. Awesome. So let's go ahead and pull up our source control window, because I was making some changes while the festival still was going on. Specifically, I was trying to make sure that our /LOC capability was working. And, you know, I could actually go to the other maze just to symbolically have a maze in sight while we're working on this. So let's go ahead and do that. In the meantime, I'm going to pull up the plugin manager and load Festival Buddy. Okay. So we don't have swift travel to Westbury, but we do have swift travel to the festival grounds, which are at Westbury, and are in fact where we want to be right now. Breeland Festival Grounds. But in case you didn't know it, if you do want to be at Westbury, there's only a Southbury Stablemaster there, but there is a Breetown horse right here, which will pop you into just in front of the Westbury Stablemaster. So you, from the far-ranging Stablemaster, you have easy access to East and Westbury. But we actually want to be here at the festival grounds, so we're going to ride on over to what I think of as the original maze. I don't actually know which order they came out in, but it's the first one I encountered. So that's all that really matters, right? And we're going to go ahead and pop in there so that our /LOC capability works. Okay. So, if that is a spring festival, then we can go ahead and bring up the hedge maze map. And if we do /LOC here, we can see that our arrow, not only is the location correct, but which way you're facing is also correct. And that can be very helpful navigating around in the maze. What we didn't have was correct support for French and German, and possibly Russian, though that's less on my radar because it's less easy to test. So what we're going to do is take a look at the changes I did to make that work better, and then we'll move on to other things. Okay, so pretty sure I committed these things. There we go. Cool. So the first thing was these messages. When I was first importing this in from probably Waypoint plugin into Festival Buddy, I was under the impression that I cared about what the server name was. So I might someday care about what the server name was. And that got us into trouble because the server names are irregular. In the English, for instance, you will sometimes see you are on such and such server. Let's do that right now. You are on Treebeard server. But sometimes you also have a language prefix. En-RP Laurelin, DE Gwai here. In fact, if we go into a plugin data user directory, what do we have here? Evernight, ENRP, Laurelin. Looks like I haven't logged into Gwai here on here. But these prefixes that are suggestive of what the primary language of chat is on the server or what the purpose is of the server make patterns detection of the server name a little bit harder. Then we have what server number it is, which in German is in parentheses and in English is not in parentheses. And all of that makes things much more complicated to properly detect this chunk of information. What's the name of the server that you're on? And currently, the Festival Buddy plugin, Festival Buddy 2 in this case, doesn't actually care the name of the server that you're on. So it gets much easier if you start checking at R number, LX, LY, OX, OY, OZ, and an optional header. That's the only information we need to tell where your cursor should be in the maze map window and what direction it should be oriented. The rest of it, the server name, the server number, and the game timestamp, not necessary. And so it simplifies things a lot if we just throw up our hands and say, okay, ambitious and unnecessary, now it's going to work better. And so that's what we did, is boil all of these down into what it actually needed. Now what I did for the hedge maze and for Tanglecorn is to go just outside the maze, just inside the maze, and then just behind the maze, just to make sure that was the same LOC on both sides of the maze. And that boils down into these 4 regular expressions. And basically they're the same repeated, but one without the heading and one with the heading. And it might be possible to write a regular expression where that is an optional part of the pattern. But I was lazy. I just said, we'll match this one first. And in fact, I committed this backwards. It should have been heading first, and we'll see that in a future commit. Because this will match, the first one there will match the second one as well. So the one with the heading should always be first, and then the one without the heading should come after that as a optional follow-on. And we'll see that. And then there were some other patterns that I did not see for the mazes, but it doesn't actually hurt to have them here too much. So they include the see inside flag. That's for a more broader application for waypoint. That's more important. But if you're just talking about the mazes, then the /LOC output around those mazes is probably going to be good enough. So these got committed in, but they are commented out. So we can resurrect them someday if that's helpful. Okay, fix the ordering. This is exactly what I was talking about. If you have this pattern come first, it will match this one and the next one. So if I'm not going to consolidate them into a single pattern, then at least the one with the heading, which may or may not be there, has to come first. Okay, and then finally, I was noticing that the parsing of the /LOC command on my machine with my 64-bit client was not working because Lua was expecting a decimal number to be, in this case, 416,56 in order to be parsable as a decimal number in the German and French languages. And this is an easy enough fix to do, but it was just, in order to see it correct on my machine, I had to throw in a little bit of an extra step. We had a toNum call on OX and OY, and what we want to replace that with is a more complicated function called euronormalize. And what does that look like? Well, that's the other file here that was committed. So this is a pretty standard boilerplate piece of code that you'll see in numerous plugins that care about decimal numbers. Specifically, parsing decimal numbers out of a string. So the first thing we do is we say, are we in a Euro format? And just for clarity, that means, are we expecting numbers, whole numbers and fractional parts of a number to be separated with a comma or with a period as the radix symbol? And what we can do is we can call toNumber on 1, 000, because that will either parse as 1000 if we are using English American parsing rules, or that will parse as 1 if we're using the European style. So, to number of 1, 000, is that equal to 1? If so, Euro format. Cool. Now that we know whether we're using Euro format or not, we're going to define a function called Euro normalize. And that's either, that is going to be one of these two definitions. Lua lets you do conditional function definitions. It's a little wonky, but it's very flexible, very helpful. So Euro normalize, if we are not in Euro format, just from the American perspective first, then we're getting passed in a value. If the value is nil, then whatever, it's 0. We don't care. Otherwise, we are going to replace any commas in that string with period. We might not have any, but if we were given a Euro string and we want to parse it as a US string, we're going to first replace any commas with periods. Then we are going to call toNumber on that string, which is going to pop out a numerical representation of that string. Cool. And then the European one is the opposite. The European one says first, if there's any periods in this string, replace them with commas, and then parse it as a number using European values. And again, we know this will work, we know this will give consistent results because which version of this function is used is based off of how is Lua parsing stringified numbers with commas in them at the time that this plugin was loaded. So that's not going to change. You'll have to exit your LOTRO client to get something different. But during this run of your LOTRO client, we know how Lua is parsing string versions of numbers with commas in them. And with that, we have a version of Euro normalize that will tend towards spitting out USified numbers or Eurofied numbers. So that's Euro normalize. Like I said, I didn't come up with that. I was inspired by some other plugin that had to deal with this problem. And most of the time, you will expect that this is not going to be any sort of problem, that the stuff will match. But in this case, I was seeing my Lua on my machine, in my LOTRO, wanted these numbers to be separated by a comma, but they were being separated by a period. So it was causing an error. So my hope is that will work on all machines everywhere now. So that's what that change was. So those were the changes I did over the last week to make sure that the /loc, which is, again, that's just the English command, but there's a handy-dandy reference over on the forums. Was it by Thurlore? I can't remember. Yep, Thurlore put out a handy-dandy reference lining up the different commands in the different languages. And so if we do a search for /loc, we can see that that's going to be /pos in the German, /loc in the English, and /emp in the French. Ultimately, we're not responsible for issuing the /loc command in this plugin, although I do hope I was going to say, did I do that in DTracker? I don't think DTracker ever issues it. It just, it might actually. Suppose that is a question to write down for later. Does DTracker use localized versions of /loc ? Because if you type one of these into your client /POS, nope, doesn't work. If you /EMP, nope, unknown command. You only get the ones that correlate with your language. You can't just freely choose amongst all of them. Which, on the one hand, sure, but on the other hand, why not? Why not accept whatever? Okay, that catches us up. Don't see any questions about that in chat, so let's move on. I'm just saving off that link for later reference. Okay, so what do we have in our working directory, and is it a problem? We have a debug statement, We have more debug statements. We have the options stuff that we're in the middle of working on. And we have some other stuff that we're in the middle of working on. Cool. Okay. So what files are we working on? Time functions, great. And options win, Harvestmath, maze map win. Okay, all of the files that we have open right now. Cool. So where were we? What were we? Who were we? Okay, the first thing we had on this was change references from 10 to maze reset time or something similar. Cool. Let's search for the word 10. All right, if we just search for the word 10, we're going to get a lot of false positives, but some of them are in language stuff. So we're not going to do that. Okay, so first thing we can do is look in time functions. See if we can find 10. We do find 10. We can see in the diff here that time functions, we started by introducing a local called maze reset hour. And even here, we could be a little bit more explicit. We don't have to be, but we could be. Local maze reset hour server time equals 10. So we could be a little bit more explicit about how we're constructing this. So 10 a.m. server time. So we have a variable to capture that and that alone. Then we can say, okay, the actual reset hour, and we can even call this local if we wanted to, maze reset hour local, equals maze reset hour server time plus the local time offset. Okay, let's do that. Maze reset hour local. In fact, I called it server time. I'll probably just call it server to make it a little bit easier. Okay. Magic numbers creep into our code in all sorts of different places. I try to fight against that. You've heard me talk about them before on this stream, or on other versions of the stream. But this is how I try to combat them. Give them meaningful names. Explain what they are if it's not necessarily obvious. And then use that named value in a way that makes sense. Server time plus the local time offset equals local. Cool. That's logic I can get behind. Okay. Let's go ahead. Hello, little one. Here's a cat. Let's go ahead and at least commit a couple of things here. Yet this a little bit less complicated. So we're going to go ahead and do these two new variables. And then this to do is what we're working on right now. And we can see these changes here as well. Okay. So we're going to grab that. We're going to grab this. We're going to grab those. Renamed function variable. Actually, introduced variable in place of magic number. Cool. So that'll be a start. Now we still have 10 in here. Get previous hour 10, definitely. But what we really want is, again, we're talking about maze reset hour. Okay, so hour is 10. That really should be time matches reset, I think. Maybe name it more explicitly Boolean. Does time match reset? If it's a little less fluent feeling if time matches reset flows a little better. If does time match reset is more explicitly is talking about a Boolean though. Is time reset time? Naming things is hard. There's a cat being manhandled over there. I'm guessing it was stepping on a keyboard.
No, I'm just going for my food.
Oh, going for the food. That makes sense. Explains why he's putting up with being held so much. Hour is 10. Hour is reset. Is time is time. Nope, I liked it better. Does time match reset? It's fine. It's such a small variable. I hate feeling like I'm naming something wrong though. Okay. I moved another 10 variable. Let's do it again. What's next on 10? Hour after 10. Is time after reset. Cool. We'll do that one. What is up with you? You're going everywhere. Try not to climb on those. Those are paintings. Okay, now we finally have get previous hour 10. Awesome. What should that be? That should really be get previous maze reset hour, I think. So get previous maze reset hour. Okay, so that's a start. What we want to do now is commit that before it gets more complicated. All right, get previous maze reset hour. Great. Now we're going to keep on going. Do we have another 10? We do have one there. What about here? We do have one there. Time functions, 10. We do not. Awesome. Returns the previous. Uh, 10 o'clock version of the instruction note converts server time to local time using offset. This would be 16 what's there, 15 RNTSD, and over that. Yeah, sure, that works great. And I'm concerned that because we are conflating server and local time so much, that we're going to be sad that this is previous maze reset hour, that we're not including local in there somewhere as a key of what we're expecting it to return. On the other hand, most times on the local system are local. So that's the whole thing that we're trying to fix here. So we'll revisit that if it becomes a problem later. Okay. So time functions is done. We have other stuff in here to worry about, but that part is done. Okay, so in the Harvestmath Maze ID win, we have content and then previous 10. We have the previous 10. That's going to be easy. In fact, let's find all the previous 10s. Previous 10 here, we're going to go ahead and change that to previous maze reset hour. Great. One less thing to worry about. Same thing here. We're going to go ahead and replace previous 10 with previous maze reset hour. Remove another 10 variable. Again, we're not committing in that output there. However, this one was already there. Is just changing one that was already committed, possibly unintentionally. But that's a new commit that I don't want to do right now. Okay. Previous 10, local 10. That's a new line. Previous 10, previous maze. Okay. Good. And the rest of those are outputs. Okay. Cool. Just double check. Previous 10, previous 10, previous 10. Good. This one, previous, 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 previous. Great. I guess, before we get too far, we should make sure there aren't any syntax errors that prevent the plugin from loading. There are not. Awesome. Gasper, what are you up to? Is there food in the kitchen? Are you keeping an eye on it for us? That's what you're doing? Thank you. I don't think Indian would agree with you and your little cat stomach. Every once in a while, I will open up a can of wasabi peas, and the metal pulling off the top of that sounds very similar to the metal pulling off of wet cat food. And my goodness, are they interested until they stick their nose in there and get a whiff of the wasabi. And then, and only then, are they convinced that it is not actually cat food. At least they don't try to lick the wasabi. Hi. Yeah. Okay. Where are we? Who are we? Why are we? To do. Change references from 10 to maze reset time or something similar. Done. Warn if the maze will change sooner than the end of the maze quest. I mean, that's a nice to have, but it is not a big deal. Ghost says, haha, typical cat. Yeah. Yeah. Occasionally we're eating things that are of interest to them. For instance, Little Redhead has her fish dish that Casper would very much like to eat. But I tend towards more spicier food than Little Redhead does. So my veggie biryani, you know, I don't think it's too spicy, but it's definitely spicier than a cat would prefer. Or Little Redhead, for that matter, as it turns out. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and come into time functions and come on up here. So we have a table that needs to be fleshed out. So let's go ahead and do that. So we know we're going to do a 2025. And let's go ahead and make sort of a blank template that we can work off of. And to do that, we're going to start with the previous line. And I'm just going to replace all of the numbers with zeros. So hopefully that makes it obvious that they need to be fixed. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're going to go ahead and notice how the Lua extension here in Visual Studio Code is pointing out that it can tell that I have duplicated the same index into this table. 205 appears multiple times, and it knows that that is probably unintentional, that I have probably written myself a bug. All right, 68, 67, 73, 72, and 70. And the start for EU, 90. And we're using days of the year because it's a nice, easy way to compare where we are. We don't have to worry about what month we're in. 86, 84. Cool. And then coming down the right side, we start with 308, and we're going to go to 306, 305, 311, 310, and 308. Continuing on down, 299, 298, 304, 303, and 301. So that gets us through 2029, which feels like far enough in the future. And again, I assume these dates are somewhat subject to change. So, to do, verify these are still correct and add future entries. To do in, let's say, 2026. I'm going to guess that the 2025 entries are probably correct enough for our purposes. Okay, so we had partially completed code. Now, we're going to have to fake ourselves out here. Little Redhead says, Capster is being funny, wandering around, batting at random things, chomping on cat food. Jump, jump, jump. Okay, so in the place where we call isDST start stop overlap, we're going to want to set up a fake date. So we're going to replace this line to do delete following testing line do not commit. And to do. Okay, so what we want to do is give ourselves an actual date, hour, and minute that we can play around with. Now, we happen to know that Netherlands went into daylight saving time, and Europe in general. Saturday 26, we can verify this in our handy dandy table. DST, sorry, I said Saturday, but that was Saturday evening a la LOTRO time, so really Sunday. So that is the 27th at 3 a.m. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and say that this is 27. Red Dork says, I operate exclusively on LOTRO time. Yeah, it's very handy to just know which time is the correct time, right? Okay, 4 and minute 0. Now, I must ask, I bet that cares about more things. Day of year and year. Okay, so we'll want to set that as well. Actually, we're going to do this differently. Instead of playing around with those local values, we're going to affect local date directly. So local date dot day equals 27, local date dot month equals 10, and we'll do that differently. Local date dot year equals 2024, local date dot hour equals 4. In fact, hour could be 3. Local date dot hour minute equals 1. So 1 minute after the change. We also need to set local date dot day of year to be equal to whatever it needs to be. In this case, Netherlands, that is date 301. Great. 301. And local date dot is DST equals false in this case. Now, this is a case where unit testing would be a wonderful idea. And it is tempting to go ahead and actually do some of that. Why is server month not getting used? Sorry, I was just checking Lua answers over at Stack Overflow to see if there is a straightforward day to get to convert to construct month year month day into a day of year. Since we started with the idea that we're going to be using the day of year. Okay. That's why we don't use a year, because the server time command doesn't get the year. But as long as you're not near the end of December 31st or the beginning of January 1st, you are going to be able to know what the year is. It's a very intent cat. Oh, the cat's getting banished from the table. It lasted half a second. Well, I appreciate Casper's coming out of his shell, if only for fish. That would be amusing. That's true. If we go sit on that couch, he might be on the one on that direction. All right, well, anyone who's interested can see Casper over there attempting to get fish, while Little Redhead attempts to eat in peace. I'm surprised he's not up on the couch yet. The battle for the ages, says Redrick. Indeed, yes. We'll see how it goes. Okay. So I was mentioning unit tests. Unit tests are one of my favorite things to have in certain situations. When you have a purely algorithmic function that takes some stuff in and spits some stuff out, it can be really nice to write up some functions that probe the behavior of that algorithm. To say, well, what if I give you -1? What if I give you 1,000,000? What if I test the edge cases, make sure you get something sensible. And more importantly, make sure that you continue to do that over time. Maybe you want to make changes to the algorithm. And you already have a record of how it should behave and a way to test it almost instantaneously to see if it does. Now, there is probably unit testing framework of some ability in the turbine files. So let's go take a look at those. We're going to go ahead and install those. I'm loading up LOTRO Plugin Compendium and typing in turbine. Add. Fantastic. So what we want to do is go to Documents, Lord of the Rings Online, Plugins, and Turbine, and then look under Testing and see what we see. And I don't know that we're actually going to use this. This might be very useful to learn in general, but I'm learning it might be a little overkill for today. Okay, import turbine dot testing. Okay, that's going to hit the init here, which will get everything, and adds the command unit test. Okay. Unit test command. So we have a check command, and it's called unit test. So we are going to see yes command, that is a shell command. We're going to make a shell test runner. Say it's going to be verbose. And then in case we're only trying to run a single unit test, we're going to pass in some arguments. We can also call get help on this, and this is unit test. So /unit test space help, awesome. Then what? This is going to be a shell test runner. All right, let's take a look at that. Shell test runner. By default, we are not verbose, but we know that we are going to be set to verbose in the command here. And let's see, there's a function called begin unit test set and unit test set. Do we feel like these are things that need to be called by us? Probably not. This was run unit test by name. Well, that's in test runner. Okay. Shell test runner. Shell test runner is a test runner, of course. So in test runner, we get the ability to probe if something is a unit test method. Okay. It has to start with test, and it has to be a function. Interesting. How is that used? So, current class. Okay, we're iterating through members of the class, and we're saying, okay, so And we're using Lua's version of reflection, right? Just iterate through the class, which is just a table. Look for things that start with test and are a function. Hyrule asks, whoa, are those board games back there? Those are board games back there. So we have board games in this cabinet here, and the smaller games are on that shelf there, and then more games are on that cabinet, and then when we run out of space, we go up. So all of that is also more board games over there. Yeah, well spotted. If you squint really hard, you might even be able to tell which ones are which. I'm guessing that's a little bit too small and also washed out by the lamp that's right next to it. But maybe you can spot some iconic graphics or something. You say it's quite a collection. Yeah, we had to give up a lot of our board games when we moved from Colorado to the Netherlands, but we've been slowly accumulating more over time. Okay, so we have a way to, a heuristic method to say, is this a test? Well, it starts with test and it's a function. Cool. Begin unit test, end unit test, begin unit test, end unit test, begin test, end test. A bunch of stub functions. Run unit test by name, which is the thing called by the unit test chat command. So we're going to just make a unit test, get unit test by name. So name might be mandatory. Fascinating. Okay. But let's see what get unit test by name gives us. Return unit test registry name. Okay. If there's no unit test, this will return nil. And then we run unit test set. In the unit test classes, we're going to use run unit test helper to execute those. That's what we saw before. It's going to iterate through, find everything that's a test. Cool. Examples would be really nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to table figuring out how to make this work the way I want it to, and show how we're just going to bootstrap our own more primitive, probably, unit testing framework for the moment. The one thing I would really like is, assert. Yeah, the asserts here are very nifty. We'll be doing per person versions of those. Okay, so what we want to do is in time functions, we have time functions, and we're going to make a directory called tests. And we're going to put it in the wrong location. That's going to be a little sad. There we go. So we have tests, and what I like to do is correlate the names of things. So this is going to be time functions test.lua. I call it test plural because there's probably going to be more than one test in there. So what we want to do is what do we want to do? Little Redhead says, Casper was well behaved and sat on the floor staring at me the whole time, so I gave him a piece of my fish at the end. It says Lucky Casper. Yeah, that's nice. That works out well. All right, test the DST and time begin by testing the DST and time zone functionality. Okay, how do I want to do this? First thing I want to do is verify. Do I have a debug flag somewhere? Show debug options. Awesome. If not, show debug options, then return end. We're just not even going to process this file if we're not in debug mode, which means we have to include it after the options window. Well, that's easy enough to do. Tests. Fantastic. There's 6 raiders coming in from the Master of Dungeons. Hello, the Master of Dungeons, and welcome to Plugin Along, where we talk about LOTRO plugins. Right now we're standing in the hedge maze looking at the Festival Buddy code for stuff and things, time zones, daylight saving times. Feel free to stick around. There's going to be very little of the actual playing of LOTRO and very much a lot of the looking at code related to plugins for LOTRO. So we're going to go ahead and import cube plugins dot festival buddy 2 dot and here we want to go ahead and look at tests dot time functions tests. Now we can know that that's correctly being imported because we can come in here and just do a quick turbine.shell.writeline tests imported. Cool. So we're going to go ahead and reload Festival Buddy. We can see tests imported. Fantastic. So what do we want to test? Well, we want to test a couple of things. We want to test this. So function test is DST start overlap. Now, normally I would add a suffix. What kind of a test are we doing? So, before begin is a sort of a classic one. After end, in the middle. We have some edge cases that we know we have, but that's just an example. Now, again, we're sort of bootstrapping our own testing mechanism, so we need a way to store these. Functions, local functions to test. That's going to be a table. And we'll do a table.add function to test. This I think we can do .add. Functions to test. Is it insert? Sure. Now, might be easier instead of doing table insert, just local function add test function, and we can do it here, right? Table.insert functions to test and test function. Cool. And at that point, we can replace this with add test. That. Okay. So the last thing we need is a test runner. So we're going to go ahead and turbine.shell.writeline testing. Cool. So now we know we're in there. Function test runner. So what this is going to do is going to for key value in pairs, and we could even do I pairs. We know we're going to have that. I pairs functions to test do, and we're going to go ahead and probably actually, how did the tester get the name of that? Member name, member in pairs. Class. Okay, that's less helpful than I was hoping. But I am curious if we just do a toString on that function name. Can we do that? Oh, hey. I hear that there was a donation towards Extra Life, raising money for children's care. Thank you very much, Anonymous, for your 30 money unit donation. I don't know if it was specifically from someone watching the stream, but just in case, we're going to do a little flip here, a little Hobbit celebratory flip. And in fact, might actually do a little hero pose as well, representative of how that person probably feels having donated such a generous amount of money towards children's health. Thank you very much. Okay. What we'd like to do is not have to write anything out in each individual function, but go ahead and get the name of this function. So, Lua function get string name of function. I'm just doing a quick little search. How can you print the name? I'm going to just call toString on it, see what happens. Testing, and we're going to go ahead and toString of value. And then we're going to go ahead and call value, and that'll be that. Let's give that a try. Oh, finally, we need to actually call our test runner. Let's see what happens. Okay, so we can see when we did toString on that, we printed out the memory address of the point of the function, which is a bit of a bummer. T and check has used a lurk command that I'm not sure actually exists here, but I appreciate that you are here and lurking. Wow, I should probably spell function correctly. Not that Lua actually cares if you spell it correctly. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do a turbine.shell.writeLine here, and we're going to go ahead and dump out that and see if maybe it contains a name in and of itself. It does not. Okay, new plan. What if we added that as a string? And instead of insert, what if we did functions to test of the test function, and again, this is the string name of it, equals global dot, and here we need to be in cube plugins dot festivalbuddy2 dot tests and test function. I think that is correct. Okay, so now key is actually going to be the name of it, testing key, and we can still do value. Let's give that a try. All right. We can see we loaded that. We can see testing. Let's get rid of that. Right out shell. That right line. Check. Oh, I never got rid of the eye pairs. That will catch you. Okay, so we can see outside we said testing that before, and then inside we have testing with the exclamation point. So we can see that the function is getting called. Awesome. We now have a way to have a test function to hopefully simply add it with a one-line call. This could be even simpler, but for now, again, we're kind of bootstrapping a testing environment. And then a runner that's automatically going to kick off when the plugin is loaded, run through any of the tests that have been registered, and tell us which ones it is calling. So we can go ahead and write a couple of tests. Now, as he starts up, overlap is going to take a local date time. And we can see that this, if we look at how it is called, it's called with the result of a call to turbine.engine.getDate. Okay. Now, that is a type of engine get date table, which is kind of a not really a real structure. It's just one that the Lua, I should say, the LOTRO API extension introduced to kind of encapsulate what is it that we think is being returned. It's a table. So we can instead say local date equals get engine get table. That might work. Nope, undefined. New. Can we do that? Maybe not. Okay. To make sure we have the right structure, I'm going to call get date, but then we're going to override it with the stuff that we actually care about. So local date, whatever. Now, we don't actually have to call get date. We could, in fact, just say this is a table. In fact, this is a table with all of this stuff in it. That would also be fine. Now, is that everything that could be in there? Let's take a look. Year, month, day, hour, minute. We don't have second. It does not matter for our purposes. Day of week, we're not going to use. Day of year, we are and is DST. Perfect. We've got everything we need. Okay. So, what I'd like to do at some point, in order to support more testing, Detect Time Zone itself is going to need to accept in what is generally the result of calling get date, but we can pass it in and say this is what the result of calling get date is. And in other languages, this might be a mock object where you control what it returns, or just the thing that it's going to give you that result. Call this function, get the result, or we'll pass you the thing. There's a couple different approaches to that. But in the meantime, we are looking at, it's only taking your local date. Great. Okay. Drill on in. So what we want to do is just walk through each of the possibilities that we know are concerns, see what it is, spit out the results, kind of a convention. If it's a success, you don't emit anything. It'll just be a successful run. A lot of the frameworks you'll be able to assert things that are true or not, and if the assertion fails, the testing framework will catch that assertion and represent it as a failed test. Otherwise, if there's none of those, it's a successful test. And that's what we really care about, is when these do not work. Okay, so before the beginning, we know, thanks to our handy-dandy lookup table here, that before the beginning for here is going to be at. Sorry, I was just remembering that before the beginning is complicated when it comes to fall because we repeat time. Some days you just want to go back to the person who invented daylight saving time and say, hey, this is going to cause more problems than it's going to solve. Okay, so we're going to be firmly before. We're going to be at 2 in the morning on day number 301, and daylight saving time there is true. Then we are going to result equals, and this is going to be is DST starts.overlap local date. What we want is to add a function called assert. Function assert are equal A, B. So if A equals B, and that's where we might get into some problems. Let's go take a look at these assertions. Assert might just want to pull all of these in. What was a function? Set a class. Try and compare are equal. That's fantastic. Yeah, so this is why comparison can be a little bit tricky. CLC agrees, no more day saving time would be great. Yeah, I feel like you don't need to mess with the clocks for this. If a country really wants to be like, you know what, normally we generally start business at 9 o'clock, but when we do that at this time of year, that's inconvenient. So for this time of year, we're just going to start business at 8 o'clock. And you would get, the same benefits, if you want to call them that. But you wouldn't have all of this computer infrastructure that, I don't know, that would probably cause different problems. But in the current state of the world, in many places, this does not feel like it's solving a problem. Okay, so what are they doing when we say are equal? We get the static type of the first, static type of the second. If those are not the same, then we return false. Okay, they're type the same. Cool. Then if the first one is a table, we know at this point, then the second one has to be a table. So we're going to check table are equal. Otherwise, we're going to just say a basic equality. Cool. What's the table are equal doing? All right, so first of all, we're getting the static types of the first and second. If they're not the same, cool, don't have to worry about it. And if at least one of them isn't a table, and they are the same, then this isn't the right function. So, and then we iterate through every element of the table, seeing if they're the same. Fantastic. These things get complex fast. So, we're not going to be anything... we're not going to do anything that complicated. Really, right now, we just want to check the results of this Boolean function. If it is true, cool, done. If it is not, we're going to go ahead and turbine.shell.writeLine assert failed. But do we want to do that? Yes, we do. Message. Okay. Now, we're not doing anything else here. In a classic assert, you might stop the processing of the function. But right now, we're just going to say assert is true, result, and then we'll just say this is before NL start. Actually, hang on. Before NL end. Cool. Let's see what happens. Let's add local test state equals true. True if all passed, false if failure. And in this assert, if the assert failed, we're going to set that to false. You know what? Let's make this easier. Test failed equals false. And then if a test fails, then test failed equals true. And then what we want to do is, before calling each one of these functions, we want to go ahead and reset test failed equals false. That if test failed, then turbine.shell.writeLine at least one test failed. No. Local test passed count equals 0. Local test failed count equals 0. Cool. Just some basic reporting. If test failed, then we want to go ahead and say test failed count equals that plus 1. We can even do the other. Else test passed count equals that plus 1. And then finally, after we've done all these, we can say turbine.shell.writeLine tests complete, passed, test passed count, failed, test failed count. Okay. So that'll give us some feedback that stuff is actually happening. Okay. Very cool. So we can see here that we're running a test function. And you know what? Let's add it. Let's color this up. So function test output. No. Test rate line. Test rate. So we want to do a turbine.shell.writeLine of the message, but we do want to use color tags And for an example of that, we're actually going to come into a different plugin that is not currently installed. Let me go somewhere else real fast. This is going to be in Deed Tracker, and this is going to be in General Functions. And then this is going to be in debug. So we can see we're going to use a RGB tag before and after. So let's go ahead and open this up. So RGB, concatenate the message, and then concatenate in a close RGB. Looks right. But we need a good color for unit test. What's a good unit test color? Well, we could in fact have two different colors, one for good and one for bad. Green and red, terrible though they are for some colorblind people, might be a good starting point here. So RGB, so I don't know, 55FF55, and FF5555. Let's give that a shot. We want to go ahead and use that though, so we're going to go ahead and say anywhere we have a right line. Okay, so that is a fail right there. Great. And here we test function. There we go. Let's see just how clashing that is. I really just want it to stand out. Okay, test function. We have test is DSC starts up over again. Assert failed, expected true, but got false. Actually, I don't want is true. Is the overlap, this is before the beginning. So we actually want false. Now we could just negate this, not result, but we could have an assert is false. Function assert is false. A message. Cool. So if not a, assert failed, expected false, but got true. And then we can change that to assert is false. And come on in here. Okay, and here we can see no red output, and at the end, test complete, passed 1, failed 0. Cool. Now that we have a basic idea of what we're doing, we can add more assertions to the same function. So instead of this being begin, we could just test overlap and do a bunch of conditions in here. Or we can split it up, begin and end. So, autumn. Okay, so we have before NL end. We want some edge cases in here. A minute. We have 3 edge cases just before 3 a.m. No, just before 2 a.m. Between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., but is DST equals true. Time has first repetition. Hey, you. What's up? Yeah. We need between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. is DST equal false, second repetition, and then after 3 a.m. is DST equal to false. After 3 a.m., same day, but DST equals false. Okay, before 2 a.m., same day. 3 edge cases for NL transition. And I say 3, but 4 cases for NL transition. Okay. We have before 2 a.m. at the same, and this is before. We can actually just copy that as the message. $1.59. Okay. We want, and in fact, we can keep on modifying this structure. Of this, so we have before 2 a.m. Between that is the first repetition, second repetition, and after 3 a.m. same day is that. So what we expect is test is DST start, stop, overlap, autumn. So we expect that to be false, and we expect the rest of these to be... we haven't actually started it yet. So expect the first two to be false, the second two to be true. And then we need a second set of these. 4 cases for US transition. And the US, we know from the time function's lookup table here, that the US is ending at 2 o'clock. Correct me if I'm wrong, people in the US who just had to deal with this, but I think that means at 2 o'clock the clock flipped. No, hang on. Did it flip back to 1 o'clock? Stop dealing with this for 5 years, and suddenly you just can't remember it anymore. All right, Sunday, 3 November at 2 o'clock. Clocks are turned backward 1 hour to 1 o'clock. Okay, so it went from 2 to 1. Here in the Netherlands, it goes from 3 to 2. You have to stay up extra late to see it happen. Same basic idea, but we're going to go ahead and before 1 a.m. the same day, between 1 and 2, between 2 and 1, after 2 the same day, and then any day in between the edge days, the transition days. Okay, so we want the same thing here, where any, oops, what did I do? Oh, yes, I was expecting to leave them as a clump, and I didn't. So we're going to do the same thing before 1 a.m. that day, between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. First repetition between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. Second repetition, and after 2 a.m. on that day. And then finally, any day after US transition day And finally, any day before NL transition day. So we'll start with local result equals false, so I don't have to redeclare it. Oh, and we'll also hoist up the local date time up here. All right, so assert is false. Result, and this is any day before that. So these are the cases when I'm thinking about unit testing function code like this that's trying to figure out where you are between USB ending and the Netherlands ending and the US ending. Which side of those events are you, before, middle, or after? And since these things happen on a specific day, we can break that up into before that day, after that day, or in that boundary on that day. And maybe the logic will get simpler as after we make it correct. But by having unit tests, we'll be able to tell when we tweak the logic if we've broken anything. That's the goal anyway. Okay, so before any day in between the transition days, any day before NL transition. Okay, what I'm expecting this to do is have a bunch of failures. But let's check if the asserts are correct. False, false, false. Then we have true, 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 true. This should be false. False and false. Cool. Let's see all the failures. Now we're actually going to see a bunch of outputs here that I would prefer not to. So let's come on into there and find those turbine shell write lines. We might need those here shortly, but for right now, I just want to see those error statements. Great. So, SDSD starts up overlap autumn. We saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 failures. That's actually not too bad because we tested 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different cases. So, there's a paradigm of development called test-driven development that we're edging our way closer to. And the goal being, you write a test that fails, and then you write the code that makes the test succeed. And by doing that, you dodge the age-old programmer problem of making a tweak and it doesn't work, and you make another tweak and it doesn't work, and you make another tweak and it doesn't work, and then you put in an output statement to figure out why it's not working, and you realize your code was never being hit for whatever reason. None of those changes you made could ever have mattered because the code was never being executed, and you're like, And so one of the many benefits of test-driven development is you know for a fact that the code that you changed made the test pass because that's the only thing that you changed, and the test went from failing to passing. So by definition, your code did the thing that you thought it should do. So let's play around with that. Which one failed first? Ideally, in order. Between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Let's go find that. Oops. I did not successfully copy that. Okay, this one right here. Well, for starters, we haven't been changing this thing. We do need to change this. So, what we want to do is maybe make a helper function. Function make local date, year, month, day, hour, minute, day of year is DST. And why is that useful? It's going to turn all of this into a single line and a lot fewer characters. So local date equals make local date 2024 10 27 159 301 true. Now, is this harder to read? Absolutely. But does that matter for right now? I don't think so. So we're going to go ahead and collapse that down. You know, I deleted that, but I should really use that. Year, month, day, hour, minute, day of year is DST. There we go. Return local date. Great. So, what I want to do, we say any day before NL transition day. So we're going to go ahead and just make it the 25th. So, um, 10:27. Cool, that's fine. The rest of the time should not matter, but it is a DST at that point. Then we check it, and we expect false. And we can make sure that that is true. But let's go ahead and set up the second one. This is going to be before 2 a.m. on the same day. Okay. This is Sunday, 27 October. Okay. 1:59 on day number 301. Sounds great. Oh, I didn't actually do the correct day of the year here. Well, it's 2 days earlier. If I do it correctly, 299. Great. Okay, let's check this out. Now we have changed a thing. Okay, expected true but got false between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Well, we happen to know, having done this, that we didn't actually write the code for that yet. We have in here, we have the local day of the year. We have the start stops for each of the US and Europe. We're going to go ahead and delete those debug statements right now. Are we? All right, I'll leave them. Local day of the year. If it is greater than the US start and less than the EU start, I have greater than or equal to, but or greater than, but it should probably be greater than or equal to. Let's go ahead and, first of all, set greater than or equal to. If the local day equals the US start, oh, we are actually talking about the and right now. So if it's greater than or equal to, and greater than or equal to that, then that's going to get us into here. Now, first of all, let's just do a turbine.shell.writeLine, checking autumn overlap. We didn't see it. Okay, so greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. All right, checking autumn overlay. Great. So that we know we're in the right spot. We're making progress. So if the local day of the year equals the US DST stop, it does not. Oh, hey, I hear another donation happened. Where do I hear it? Toffee Cake. Well, Toffee Cake has donated money towards Children's Hospital. That's fantastic. Toffee Cake, I don't know if you're watching, but if you are, I'm going to do a flip just for you. And if you're not, I'm still going to do a flip just for you. Awesome. Thank you so much for donating money towards children's health via Extra Life this year. You are heroic. One thing I really liked about this is A, that light beam goes up really far, and B, it lasts until you move. It's pretty cool. Well worth grinding out in the Paths of Valor. Alright, so we know we're in this section of code. The goal of test-driven development is to make as small change as possible to make the test that is failing not fail. Okay, so what is going on? If the local day of the year is the same, then we care about stuff. So if this is, what do we have? Local date time dot hour is less than 3. Was less than 2, then return true. End. So our goal was to get, oh wait, perhaps it wasn't failing. Or asking for is overlap anyway. Before 2 a.m. same for, sorry. Okay, so we are not in the overlap if we're both before 2. Awesome. So, between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. is failing. Okay. If local date time dot hour, actually I said less than. If it is exactly 2, then we're in this one. So if hour is less than 3 and local date time dot is dst equals something true, then return false. End. Now, we didn't actually set up the time, did we? We should set that up. Okay, this is between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Is DST is true. And then go ahead and set that up again, but yes, DST is false. And then after 3 a.m., this is going to be 3:15, false. And then, you know what, return. Can I do that? Or is it going to complain because there's stuff after? It's going to complain. That's fine. We're going to go ahead and extract that for just a moment. Make this a little bit simpler to see. Okay, so assert failed. Between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. is DST false. Second repetition. Cool. If this then return true. Okay, that's one less. After 3 a.m. the same day. Return true. Hey! All of our failing cases now succeed. Can we write this simpler? Yeah, probably. There's what feels like a lot of redundancy here. First of all, if the hour is less than 2 on the day that daylight saving time ends, then by definition it is daylight savings time. Therefore, we can hoist that up and say daylight saving time has to be true. And as we can see, that doesn't break the case. That makes this test more complicated, but now we can see these two are redundant. This one will always catch this one. So we don't need that one anymore. Oops. Let's unload that, bring it back in. We can see all of our tests still pass. Now, what else? Well, we see if a different case, then return true, otherwise return true. Sure feels like we don't need that anymore. And everything still passes. Now, we don't have all of our tests in place yet, but... Oh, but we can go ahead and toss in the last one, which was any day in between the transition days. So that's going to be the 28th. Fantastic. I'll make sure that one passes too. Oh, that's not right. I need to fix the day of. Okay. So, what else do we have? If it's the Europe DST day, then local date time hour is less than 3, and it's DST. Return false, otherwise return true. Is that as simple as it can be? Should it be simpler? Do we need the hour? Is DST is going to be true until the case that we care about? We probably don't need the hour. Assuming the SDST flag is correctly populated by the system. We are assuming that at the moment. Okay. So, we could now simplify this even further if we want to. We could say if local datetime dot is CST, if not, then actually we could just say return can we not negate it? Oh, because there's other stuff after it. We could just return the inverse of is DST. Are we in overlap? Only if DST is off. Are we sure that works? I don't know. Let's test it. Test pass. So, all of that extra code we wrote, case by case, we're able to collapse down into a single return statement. We could even split it out to a variable declaration and then a return if we want to. We don't. It doesn't matter. But we got that because we were able to write case by case, solving our edge cases, and then observe where there was overlap between the branches. But you start by writing it out more verbosely to make sure it's correct. Then once it's correct and you have tests that will check any breakage, for instance, what happens if we had forgotten that not? Oh hey, everything breaks. And that has us looking at our code real fast. Cool, okay. Let's bring it back in. Hey, everything passes. Cool. Okay. So, let's bring in the tests for the US side of the ending. And we could jump forward and say, oh, okay, this is probably going to be just returning whether or not we're in the... oh, wait, we can't do that because... Oh, hang on. Can we... Oh, I don't... I worry that the SDST is going to be a red herring because it's going to tell you whether your local time is in DST. Let's go ahead and restore some of this other stuff. Local time is DST. We don't actually care about local time. Do we? We do not. Yeah, I think I was writing myself a bug there. What we're curious about is given time's hard. What I'm trying to contemplate is I'm pretty sure in order to do this better, we would want to look at it from the perspective of which one we think we're in. If we think we're in Europe, then we can make use of the ISDST for the Europe ending, but not for the US ending. But there's a simpler thing, which is to just say on the days where the transition happens, there's only a couple hour window where it matters. Oh hey, I'm hearing the sounds of donations for children's health. Hilary on Landerval has donated $75 towards children's health. That is fantastic. I'm going to do a little flip here while I ponder my life's choices that have gotten us to here. Thank you so much for donating. You may or may not be watching, but that's okay. We salute you here. In the US, at 2 a.m., it's going to flip. In Europe, at 3 a.m., it's going to flip. So for the majority of those days, we can just assume. If we just say the transition's already happened by the time you hit that day, there's a couple hour window where it's not going to be correct. Note, due to note, returns an incorrect result between midnight and the actual start-stop of DST. Okay, we'll commit to being wrong sometimes. And if that's the case, then this gets much easier. What we want to do is we're going to mark erroneous the answers that are now becoming wrong, knowingly wrong, but we don't care about. Because this rabbit hole needs to end. And then the rest of the time, those are correct. Great. Okay. So let's go ahead and jump back in to our testing. Great. We can see erroneous and erroneous are not passing correctly. So if we are between the two, if it's greater than or equal to DST stop, and it's less than or equal, then return true. Let's get rid of the rest of it. And we can see our tests now succeed. So that's how we're going to do this. We're going to say close enough. If you are setting your Festival Buddy options for your time zone in the 2 hours between those Our apologies, it's just more complicated than it needs to be. So we're going to go ahead and restore the other unit tests that we had. I know you're trying to be helpful, system, but I don't want those comments. Okay. So, four cases for the US transition. These are happening on, oops. Yep, up here. So this is going to be Sunday, 3 November. So we're going to start with between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. Okay. So this is going to be 11:01 at whatever, 3:15 is fine. In fact, we'll just hoist that one up. 11:01. This is going to be day 306. And then we're going to go ahead and do 11:03. And this is going to be, oh, before on the same day. Interesting. Hang on. Yeah, I see. I was misreading the test I was supposed to be writing. This is going to be day 308 after all. This is going to be 308. There's between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. Sure, that's all fine. And that goes to false. Oh, and these will be marked erroneous. And erroneous. Because these are actually going to be false and false. And then after 2 a.m. the same day, so that is going to be 2:59, also false. And any day after the transition, it'll be the same as any day before. So we're going to come in here, and that's going to be 11:05, out of daylight savings time, and the day is 3:10. And that will be false. Let's give that a shot and see how that unfolds. Since we don't have the code for that yet, I'm guessing failures. There we go. First thing we needed to do was to change this range. So it's greater than or equal to and less than or equal to. Oh no, it does not. Okay. What's going on? Before 1 a.m., same day, erroneous. Okay. So we are greater than or equal to the Europe DST stop, yes, and less than or equal to the US DST stop. Okay, we have 308, 204. The stop for the US is 308, so that's good. So we're expecting true. Oh, we're asking for overlap. Less than. That needs to end a few hours early instead of starting a few hours late. Cool. All of the tests start passing. Fantastic. So, we have autumn. Now we need the exact same thing, but different for spring. So we're going to go ahead and actually copy this and just start changing stuff. Spring. Now, if we don't change anything, everything should still pass. And we can see starting spring, starting autumn, 2 passed. But that's not actually what we want. So we want to come in here, and any day before the US transition day, lowercase over the US transition. In fact, these comments can get swapped over. And then in between the transition days, and then any day after NL transition day. Awesome. Then we just need to update our data. So we start 2 o'clock on that day. So any day before, we're going to come in and say that it's going to be March 8. And that's going to be day of the year number 68. And all of our trues and falses need to be flipped here. So false, 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 true, true, true. And I think we need to ignore DST altogether, actually. It is not going to be helpful for this calculation. So we're just going to go ahead and delete it. Cool. Then we, one less thing to worry about. Okay, so we have the 8th, that's fine. We need to come in here, and we're actually going to go ahead and replace all these with March in this function. Not a reasonable thing to do. Oh, kind of. All right, we'll start with up here. So we have March 10. And March 12. Okay, so that is going to be day 70 here. And day 72 for the 12th. All right, on the actual 10th, we're going to see before, we don't actually need the last one. I'm just recognizing that the isDST is redundant here. But it's fine in the comments. Okay. Between 2 and 3 a.m. We don't actually need the, there is no 2 and 3 a.m. So this gets simpler. Oh, sorry. Are those comments still wrong? Oops. Okay. Before 1 on the same day. And after 2 same day. Okay, and just for clarity, I'm going to yank out the ones we haven't worked on yet. And see, do we think those are working? We do not. Expected true cut false. Okay, let's take a look at this. Yeah. So if this is greater than or equal then return true. Let's give that a shot. All right, tests are passing. Let's bring these other ones back in, fix them up, and get them running. Okay, so 4 cases for the NL transition. We know the NL transition is happening Sunday, 31 March. So, and we also know that the betweens are no longer valid to test. So that's going to be 331 at 12:59, and that's day number 91. We also have 331 at 2:59, same day, 91. And finally, any day after the NL transition, that's going to be 4-1, and that is going to be day 92. Let's give that a shot. Okay, everything is still passing. So what we have here is a simplified algorithm that we know is incomplete. Returns an incorrect result between midnight and the actual start-stop of DST. But, excluding those 2 or 3 hours, this gives a correct accounting for whether or not we are in an overlap period between US and Netherlands, well, Europe, where one of them has transitioned into or out of DST and the other has not. Cool. And it is marked as a guess and notes when it will definitely return an incorrect result. Very cool. So, what have we done here? We have sorted out how to make a unit test framework kind of from the ground up. We're missing a lot of the niceties that come with an actual unit test framework that most modern systems have. But we've definitely have gotten some of the basics of what we need. We need to know when something's not working. We need to know when it is working. And we have some basic reporting that says how many of these functions we've called and which one of them's had any failures in them versus which one of them seemed to pass completely successfully. That's going to let us write better time code than when we would be able to do just by eye. We found several gotchas here that would have been a little bit harder if we were just tweaking the values in the code, trying them one at a time. We're trying, I think, 10 things at a time for each of these functions. We're trying 20 different time values against this function every time we start up in debug mode. And if anything here happened, oops, we accidentally deleted a greater than sign here. That should cause something to fail. Probably multiple things that cause 2 things to fail. Okay, if we add an equal sign there to make that less than or equal to, ideally that's going to make something break. Something is broken. If we fix it, ideally we should get that back. Perfect. So the goal of the unit test, well, sort of the platonic ideal of unit testing in a test-driven environment like this, is that if you change the code to do something logically different, a test should break. And if it doesn't, add another test to test whether or not that is there. Now, the further you get away from pure algorithmic stuff into, say, user interfaces or harder to simulate environments, the less maybe you hit that ideal. But that's the code coverage ideal, where every little bit of logic in here that affects something, if you change it in a way that affects the way the logic of the function works, something breaks to tell you that you, as a reminder that, hey, you had this assumption over here, and that assumption is no longer holding true. If we came in here and instead of the US, if we did EU accidentally there, that should cause something to break. Hey, it did. It caused 3 different ones to break. which makes sense because suddenly we don't have the dates that we think we do. So that's why we like capturing edge cases in our unit tests. We have before, these various ones in the middle, actually in the middle, various ones at the end, and after the end. And all of that means that this logic is as solid as it can be. And if we accidentally break the logic by, return true here instead of false one day, we will get a notification. So many notifications that no, that actually needs to be false. So that's one reason I love unit testing, and I love test-driven development where it doesn't impede the development process too much. You're kind of, in a way, writing the code twice. In some cases, the tests get longer and more involved than the actual code that you've written. So there can be diminishing returns, and you kind of have to get a sense for how much is this going to sort out issues in the future. How useful is it to get the code working correctly now? How fragile is the test code? How likely is the code to change in the future in a dramatic way, not just little tweaking? All these things come into play to kind of inform how much of little test-driven development you should feel comfortable with. But in those environments where you have functions that are just, I give you some sort of complicated input and you spit out an output, these can have such a meaningful way of changing how you write your code, how you know that you've written the thing correctly, and how you know you've written the correct thing. We've hit 2 hours here. I'm really pleased with our progress so far. We're going to be adding more unit tests, I think, as we get into the other functions. The one that calls isDSC starts.overlap, for instance. That does pollute our searching a little bit. But in this function here, detect time zone, we almost certainly want to go ahead and make this unit testable. So we're going to see what that looks like later on, where you don't call into things like time functions directly, because that destroys testability. You instead go ahead and accept that as a parameter. We're going to play around with that as well. And we're going to finish up all of this time zone detection stuff so that we can have a very successful Harvestmath next year. In the meantime, I'm going to be committing what we've done so far into the source control here. So if you have any last minute questions, comments, concerns that you want to toss in the chat, now's a great time to get that out there. Otherwise, we'll catch it next time. Okay, it's coming on into our repository. Added unit tests for isDSC start-stop-overlap. Added basic unit test framework and unit tests for that. I'm not really going to bother to separate out which is which here. We can move stuff around if we do anything more than testing the time functions. More likely, I would like to hoist this up into the actual turbine unit testing framework. Maybe, but that introduces a dependency on the turbine files. But then again, I wouldn't be shipping the unit tests. I have to think about that. And I also have to learn how it works. That's an output. Yep, need that import. Those are all outputs. Not ready for that yet. And you know what? I'm actually good with this. We'll go ahead and commit that. Fantastic. So we're going to commit that in, push it on out. Very cool. Okay. Checking my list here. Awesome. Well, that's everything we're going to cover today. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of LOTRO plugins, and a very special thank you to those people who donated towards Extra Life during this stream. Not necessarily because of this stream, it just happened to coincide. I get that, but a very special thank you to all of those. And even more special thank you for those of you who were able to join the LOTRO stream team this last Saturday. They streamed for something like 16 hours and met their goal of $30,000 donation to the Boston Children's Hospital or other Miracle Network organizations, and that's just fantastic. So whether you were able to join us, whether you were able to contribute money, I hope you were able to have fun. If you did hop on, maybe catch a free code or two in the giveaways. But it's really cool that already the SSG team has met that goal, and thank you for being a part of it. At any rate, hope to see you here next week. We're coming up into holiday times, but I'm pretty sure I'm back next week. And until then, keep plugging along. All right, bye-bye now.